Introducing Turbografx 16, the next generation video game system. Turbografx 16 from NEC, the higher energy video game system.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ultimate Turbografx 16 review here on Player One Start. This is actually the second video in this series. If you haven't seen the first part, that's the part where I actually talk about the history of NEC as a company and the PC Engine, which is the Japanese version of the Turbografx 16. It actually came out before the Turbografx 16 did in Japan. So if you want to see that video, I'd recommend watching that one first because it sets the stage for what we're going to cover in this video. In this video, we're going to talk about the tech specs of the console, but before that, let's go ahead and talk about the localization process, because the PC Engine and the Turbografx 16 look very different, but actually accomplish the same thing. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Turbografx 16, the next generation video game system, with the performance and power to blow you away.
After the success that NEC was having with the PC Engine in the Japanese markets, it was decided to go ahead and launch the system in the US as well, but it needed a team to be able to do it. Again, this wouldn't be NEC's job alone. They would again partner with Hudson to put together a team to market it in the United States. In January of 1988, Hudson co-founder Yuji Kudo hired John Grenier to act as a liaison and project manager, while also recruiting bilingual Japanese staff to handle other duties. The company needed English speakers to interface with NEC, interpret for its staff, choose games to send to the West, and localize them. According to Grenier, they had no foreigners and they had very little English skill, so they needed somebody to help them. Hudson created this international division because when NEC brought the system over to the United States, they needed the expertise of Hudson Soft to market the software, and they needed to translate the text. This is according to Sonoko Saito, who was hired to translate games and interpret for meetings between NEC and Hudson Soft. When NEC in Japan directed its US branch to sell the PC Engine, NEC Technologies boss Keith Schaefer put together a launch team in Chicago. Schaefer, along with some of his team members, had joined the company after fleeing from Atari's struggling home computer division. Looking back on it, this was not ideal, because the Atari team had worked in the company's home computer division, which mostly sold software. Its game business was based on ports of arcade games that were already successful. The management team's expertise in the home console market was very limited. However, the team did excel on consumer marketing. The first thing the team did was actually have consumers come in and test out the system in the US. They noted that there was a lot of people who were excited about the system and liked the games, but people found the name either confusing or unappealing. The company made the decision to redesign the PC Engine's casing for its introduction to the US. Compared to other consoles of the era, the PC Engine was small, thanks to its well-engineered internals and the credit card-sized HuCard format. However, it was determined that the American audience would like something that was a bit bigger and seemed more futuristic. The name Turbografx was a simple name change, with the name itself referring to the system's speed and its strength of visuals, which were clearer and much more colorful than the earlier systems, as well as 16 referring to its 16-bit GPU. Any accessory for the system would have the Turbo prefix added onto it, with the controller being called the Turbo Pad, the multiplayer extension being called the Turbo Tap, and the HuCard now being called the Turbo Chip. In terms of redesigning the case shell, the design team later recalled that the redesign of the hardware seemed to drag on, with some saying that the company wasted months trying to create a rubberized texture cover for the console's rear expansion ports, work which was later abandoned when a usable solution could not be created. According to Grenier, Hudson Soft wasn't thrilled with the look that NEC selected either. The idea from NEC was to make something similar to audio equipment that most consumers would already have in their home. When all was said and done, the entire system would be redesigned to fit the new case shell. However, the hardware running on the inside would be mostly the same. So to tell you the truth, the PC Engine and the Turbografx 16 share the same hardware, it's just been moved around to accommodate this new case. Let's go ahead and take a look. the Turbografx 16 has a combination of features that I would see in consoles from the 80s and the 90s. First off, it has a box shape, but with rounded corners. Add to that the ridges going across the front, and the bright neon colors in its logo, and you have the look that would appeal to many at the start of the 1990s. The only thing I think holds this system back is the fact that it only natively supports RF out. But with an adapter or the Turbo CD add-on, you could get composite out. That said, let's go ahead and get this console cleaned up and taken apart. Getting my first look inside of the system, I'm actually surprised that the system itself is actually designed entirely around the board. I thought there would be some blank space in here, as the PC Engine definitely didn't take up this much space. Taking a look behind the RF shield, we get our first look at the layout of the board. As big as this board is, there isn't really much to it. That makes sense considering the original PC Engine was in a much smaller form factor. If we take a look inside that system, you can see that there are not that many chips on the board, but the card slot is connected via a ribbon cable. I'm assuming that when they condensed this on the Turbografx 16 board, this was a cost-reducing measure. But here's where we'll run into our biggest point of controversy on this system. The heart of the Turbografx 16 is actually an 8-bit custom Hudson CPU. As with many computers of the 1980s, it is based on the MOS 6502 processor clocked at about 7.6 MHz. The system itself has 8 kilobytes of main RAM and 64 kilobytes of video RAM spread across 2 chips. Games were stored on Hue cards, otherwise rebranded as Turbo cards for the United States, with about a max capacity of 2.5 megabytes. However, most games would not reach this limit. So why did NEC choose an 8-bit CPU for their next-gen game system? Well, if you look back at the mid to late 80s, NEC was pretty much number one in the home PC market in Japan. And at that time, many of those home PCs would have been using 8-bit CPUs. So if you were a game developer wanting to port your game over to the console, having an 8-bit CPU would keep a lot of things the same to where it'd make the porting process a lot easier, if that makes sense. Now that said, 16-bit processors weren't very common in computers in the mid to late 80s anyway, and the 16-bit generation would be kicked off by Sega, as they were the first to decide to put a 16-bit CPU into their home game console, so it also could have been a cost-saving measure at that time. So since the PC Engine and the Turbografx 16 on the inside share the same technology, you might think you should be able to take a PC Engine game, pop it into your Turbografx 16, and play it on your Turbografx 16. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. The big difference here is that, I don't know if it was due to the fact that they wanted to region lock this console, but they ended up changing the pin layout on the Hue card, so you can't actually put it in there and play the game. In fact, you could damage your console by doing that, so it's not recommended. But the good news about this is you actually can find converters out there that will remap the pins to the correct layout so that you can play PC Engine games on the Turbografx 16. And if you have something like an EverDrive that can actually switch this for you, you can play PC Engine games on the Turbografx 16. The tech specs are identical. But that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the graphics. So here's where the 16-bit actually comes in. The console actually uses a dual 16-bit Hudson GPU setup. These are the video display controller and the video color encoder chip. Both of these drive the display through the RF or composite outputs. The Turbografx is able to utilize a maximum color palette of 512 colors, with 482 maximum available on screen at one time. The Turbografx is also capable of showing 64 moving objects or sprites on screen at a time. And as you can see, the color palettes can be swapped per sprite. The screen resolution can vary to a maximum of 512 by 242 pixels, however the most commonly used was 256 by 239. And while that resolution may seem a bit reduced, the expanded color palette makes for some beautiful artwork. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples of some of the best graphics on the Turbografx 16. So a saying I come up with for this console is that it has the heart of a 16-bit game system, but the brain of an 8-bit game system. Because if you look at the graphics on their own, everything looks more vibrant, the sprites can be more detailed, larger, there's a lot of them on screen, but this 8-bit CPU creates kind of a bottleneck where the games play in similar style to NES games that came out before it, but the graphics look next-gen. So they didn't really add too many advanced graphical features, and even things such as parallax scrolling were few and far between in this system. But that said, graphics isn't the only thing that makes up a game. Let's go ahead and take a look at the sound. Sound production on the Turbografx 16 is integrated in with the main CPU. The only additional hardware specific to sound production is the audio amplifier located right next to it. This allowed for 6 channels of audio or 6 different sounds that could play at the same time. The console provides stereo sound both through RF and through the AV out cords. And despite some of the limitations here, they were actually able to get some decent sounding music out of the console, and here's one of my favorite examples. In this view, you can see a visual representation of each sound being played. Listening to this, it almost sounds like they're using audio samples, which in some cases they actually can. But of course, when you add in all of the sound effects, some of these channels are cut out so that those can play. Although you don't really notice it when you're actually playing the game because it'll cut out a channel that's really not important to the main melody. This was a common practice in the 8-bit generation, and it carried over into the 16-bit generation as well. While I could listen to this music for quite a bit longer, I'm going to go ahead and show you a few more examples before wrapping up the sound. These aren't necessarily regarded as the best, but here are some typical examples with a few of my favorites thrown in. So to tell you the truth, I actually like the sounds that come out of this sound chip. And it doesn't really have its own dedicated sound chip, so I guess it's just called the CPU. If you look at this and compare it to the Sega Genesis, it looks like there's less channels or less noises this sound chip can make. But to tell you the truth, it's actually creating the same amount of sounds as the Genesis, but the Genesis also included the Z80 processor from the Master System before it, so not only could they provide backwards compatibility, they could also add in the sounds that that system would make as well. And that's what gives it the total of 10 channels for that system, and this system doesn't really have that, so it only has 6 channels. But to tell you the truth, that doesn't mean that there's not some very beautiful sounding music on here. But that said, that's actually going to wrap it up for this video. In the next part, we're finally going to start diving into some of the games and the launch of the console. So stay tuned for that coming out to you real soon. And don't forget, if you like what you see, please click that like button down below, leave a comment, let me know what you liked about today's video, let me know what you'd like to see in the future. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I will see you in the next one. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.